There's just something really cool about seeing a historic watch brought back to life, and that's what I've got in for review today. We're going to be taking a look at a very faithful reimagining of a classic British World War II field watch, and these field watches are known as the Dirty Dozen. This watch follows the classic style and proportions of the original Dirty Dozen watches, coming in at only 37 millimeters, but it updates all the materials to modern standards. Today we're going to be checking out the Vario 1945 Dirty Dozen. Hey guys, welcome back to Just the Watch. My name's Dave. I live in Japan and I love to collect affordable watches. The one thing that I haven't really gotten into in my collecting journey is actually going back and buying vintage watches. That's despite there being a ton of really amazing vintage designs that I'm drawn to. I just don't feel like I have the knowledge to, figure out the right ones to get or to care for them after I get them. There's always that concern about getting a vintage watch and then having it break and needing to get it fixed and not knowing where to take it. So all of that has sort of kept me away from there. But there are ways to get a hold of these vintage designs without having those complications, and that's by getting a reissue or a reimagining of some of these watches. And that's why I'm really excited to take a look at this watch from Vario. This is a very faithful reimagining of one of the original World War II Dirty Dozen watches. Now, some of you might be wondering what a Dirty Dozen watch is, so let's talk about that for just a minute. During World War II, the British Armed Forces felt the need for a more rugged field watch to issue to their troops. And so they came up with a specification, a list of features that they needed in a watch, and then they handed that list off to all of the watch manufacturers that were capable of manufacturing something like that and said, make as many watches that meet this specification as you can, and we'll buy it. They were looking for a watch that was between 35 and 38 millimeters in diameter, a watch that had luminous material on the hands and markers so that it could be seen in the dark. They needed a shatter-resistant crystal so that it could handle the rigors of war. They wanted enough water resistance so that it could handle the trenches, and they had some specific requests for the dial. The dial had to have 12 Arabic markers for the hours. It needed to have a railroad minute track to make it easy to tell the time down to the minute. And they wanted the seconds hand to be a small seconds hand down at 6 o'clock. And so they handed that off to a bunch of watch manufacturers, and there were 12 of them that responded saying, yes, we can build a watch to meet those specifications in a large quantity and sell them to the British government for the war effort. Now, the interesting thing about this is that as long as the companies followed those specifications, they had some liberty in the actual design of the watch. So if you look at the 12 watches that were produced from these 12 companies, there are some variances on the style of the hands, the size of the case, but they all still met the specifications that the British military asked for, so they were bought and issued to their troops. And to me, that's just a fascinating thing because it means that even now, anybody could look at that same list of specifications and try to make a watch that meets that, and it would still kind of function in a very similar way with a similar style to those original watches. And if it's not apparent by now, the reason they're called the Dirty Dozen is because there were 12 companies that made 12 different watches, and they all, again, share this same aesthetic and the same connection to British history. Now, Vario is a brand based in Singapore, and the owner is a real history buff. He has done some amazing reinterpretations of other historic watches. Not too long ago, I reviewed a World War I style watch from Vario, which was practically a replica of the original World War I trench watches. And Vario has always impressed me with their attention to detail. They really do their homework on the background of their watches, and the quality on their final products is excellent. Now, I do need to note that in order to facilitate this review, Vario did give me this watch, which is why you saw the paid promotions flag at the beginning of this video. However, other than the watch itself, I did not receive any compensation for this review, nor did Vario have any input into the content of this review. So with all that out of the way, let's take a close look at the Vario 1945 Dirty Dozen. So what Vario has done here is they've taken that Dirty Dozen design along with the military specifications that were required of it and created a modern reinterpretation of that World War II style field watch. And so while this watch retains the look and style of its predecessor, the functionality and the materials used have been improved to modern standards, and Vario has put their own spin on a few of the design elements as well. And I think this is a really cool thing to do because, again, the original Dirty Dozen field watches were manufactured by 12 different companies, some of the largest names in the watch industry, companies like Omega, Longines, and IWC. And each company kind of put their own spin on the style of the watch while staying within the specifications that were requested by the British military. So I think it's really cool to see Vario kind of do the same thing where they're tweaking the design a little bit and putting their own flavor to it. Let's start by talking about the specifications, what's changed and what hasn't. First off, the size comes in at 37 millimeters in diameter, which is right in line with the original Dirty Dozen field watches. And this is a choice that's going to be very welcome by some people and will turn others off. I have a 7.5-inch wrist, and I think I could get away with wearing this watch. It's very comfortable, and I think that classic size doesn't look out of proportion for me. I personally prefer the look of a larger cased watch. That said, sub 40 millimeter watches are coming back in style, and I think particularly if you do have a smaller wrist, this is a great size for you. So given the historical nature of this watch and the current trends sort of leading back into this case size, I think that's a perfect size to go with. Now the specifications, on the other hand, have definitely been upgraded since the 1940s. By using modern materials, Vario has created a much more durable and user-friendly watch than they would have been able to make back in that time period. You're getting a sapphire crystal with anti-reflective coating, 100 meters of water resistance with a screw-down crown, and rather than a vintage hand-wound movement, you're getting a modern Miyota 82S5 automatic movement. And while this movement is in a lower caliber than the 9000 series movements from Miyota and doesn't feature that really smooth sweeping second hand, this is an upgraded 8000 series movement. It features both hacking and hand winding, and the movement itself is decorated. And crucially, like the original Dirty Dozen watches, this one features a small seconds at 6 o'clock. This is a great movement for watches in this price range. The only thing that's a little bit annoying is that sometimes you can hear the rotor spinning when it's on your wrist. It's a little bit noisier than Seiko's NH series of movements, but for me, it's a pretty minor complaint. Now, one thing that I should note before we go any further is that the strap on this watch is actually going to be different than the ones that I'm showing in this video. This watch was sent to me before Vario had finalized which strap they would include. So they actually sent me 3 different straps and wound up choosing, I believe, one that's different from all 3 that they sent me. But Vario is known just as much for manufacturing excellent straps as they are for micro-brand watches. And so all the straps you're going to be seeing on this watch are available from Vario's website, and I think all of them are excellent alternatives if you want to throw one of these in your cart if you're thinking of getting this watch. But before we get into those design choices, I want to talk a little bit about some of these design choices that Vario made to sort of make this their own. Probably the most noticeable difference from the original Dirty Dozen watches is that Vario has gone with a 4 o'clock crown instead of the standard 3 o'clock crown. Now at 37 millimeters, this is already a pretty compact watch that's going to be very out of the way, but by moving the crown to 4 o'clock, they're going the extra mile to really make sure that that crown does not cause any discomfort at all on the wrist. And it is kind of a cool, unique visual feature of this watch. And for another added personalized twist, Vario actually loomed the crown with their logo, which is a cool after dark touch. And along with that, they've gone with a very slick looking bicolor loom application so that in the dark you are getting both blue and green dial elements, with the Arabic numerals glowing blue while the other elements are glowing green. And while stylistically this looks great, unfortunately the application of loom doesn't seem to be that thick. When I ran this through my J-score tests, it only came out with a score of 2, which is pretty low for a field watch. This means you'll get a few minutes of good low light legibility, but after that it's going to fade pretty quick. So you'll have to enjoy those cool dual colors while they last. One other thing to note is that the sub-second hand is not loomed, so after dark it's only going to be the main hour and minute hand. The dial design and handset follows very closely what you would see from the original Dirty Dozen watches. 12 Arabic numerals mark the hours with a railroad track minute hand going around the outside of that. And in the daylight, I really like the choice of colors as well. You get a combination of light brown accents along with crisp white outlines, with both contrast well against the black textured dial and give the watch a warm vintage feel. Now, Vario has a kind of quirky logo design, and maybe they felt like that logo would have been out of place on a World War style vintage piece like this, and so what they've done is they've included the logo on the dial, but in a very subtle way. It is embossed under the 12 o'clock marker, but it is almost invisible unless you know to look for it. That does make the dial look kind of sterile, but I also think it's kind of a cool touch and a kind of a cool way to include your branding on there without it detracting from the vintage design that you're going for. This watch also features a more intricate level of finishing than those original Dirty Dozen watches had. Since those original watches were purpose-built for battle, finishing was not high on the priority there, but Vario decided to give you some polished accents with chamfers along the top of the lugs and on the bezel. and I think it definitely enhances the look of the case and makes this a more enjoyable watch to wear on a daily basis. Finally, to finish things off, Vario has created a custom case back with a very unique etching on the back of it. You have the silhouette of a modern Singaporean soldier, and superimposed on top of that, the silhouette of a World War II British soldier. And this is in reference to the Battle of Singapore during World War II, when the British forces mounted a defense of Singapore against the Japanese army. And I think that's a really great way for this Singaporean micro brand to tie in the history of this watch with their own story and their own culture. Finally, let's talk about a few strap options with this watch, since Vario did send 3 of their own straps over to me, and all 3 of these straps are available from their website. The strap that is closest to the one that ships with this watch is this 2-piece Cordura strap that has leather accents. The strap that ships with the watch is basically the same strap, but without the leather accents on it. Now, I happen to like the leather accents on this strap, and I have a few of these same straps from Vario, and it's one of my favorite straps. It has a very unique look that adds so much personality, particularly to military-inspired watches. But if you want a more classic look, Vario also has a great selection of Italian leather watch straps. These are very high-quality straps, very elegant with a nice taper to them, and just a beautiful pebbled leather texture. The watch features 18mm lugs, so any 18mm strap should fit just fine here, giving you plenty of options to customize the look of your watch. All right, so to wrap up my final thoughts on this watch, I really like the watch itself. For me personally, I think the 37mm size is probably smaller than I would wear, but I do appreciate that they stuck to that classic size. This is the size that the original watches from World War II were. The build quality and finishing is fantastic. I think you're definitely getting what you would hope for at that $368 price point. The only consideration you might have is that because this is such a historic watch style and because it is easy to replicate, there are a lot of manufacturers in China that are selling similarly styled watches for much cheaper. So if you just want a mechanical Dirty Dozen style watch, you can go over to AliExpress and find some in the $100 to $200 price range very easily. But I don't think you're going to get the level of care and quality control that Vario puts into here, and you're going to get the reputation of the Vario brand, which I think are very valuable things. So if you're interested in these World War II style field watches and you want to get a good one, I think this one from Vario is an excellent one to check out. Anyways, let me know what you guys think. Drop me a comment down below. Also, if you're interested in picking up a t-shirt like this one, you can grab it at my website at justthewatch.com. That will wrap it up for today. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.